Good morning, everybody. Welcome to MIPJunior. I'm really excited to welcome you here today. I'm Lucy Smith, and I'm the director of MIPJunior. And it's my privilege to introduce this session, which is View from the Top, which we're presenting in partnership with WorldScreen. For the next 45 minutes or so, you're going to hear from 4 leading figures in children's entertainment. They are Michael Carrington from ABC in Australia, Patricia Hidalgo from Turner, Paula Taborda dos Guaranys from Gloob, and Janine Weigold from Super RTL in Germany. During this lively conversation, they're going to identify acquisition trends and offer perspectives on how to spot hit shows, as well as discussing strategies for successfully offering multi-platform content to younger viewers. The conversation will be moderated by Anna Carugati-Guise, the Group Editorial Director of WorldScreen. And following the discussion, each of our speakers will be presented with the WorldScreen Kids Trendsetter Awards in deserving recognition for their leadership in the kids' entertainment business. So let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Anna and our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are all in various degrees of jet lag, so please excuse us all, but it's going to be a lively conversation. I think you know the panelists here, right? The kids community is a rather tight one, but please, we're going to do brief introductions anyway. Michael Carrington, Head of Children's Content, ABC TV Australia. Patricia Hidalgo, Chief Content and Creative Officer and International Kids Strategy, Turner International. Paula, okay, I don't want to mispronounce your name, okay? Paula Taborda dos Guaranys? Okay. Head of Content and Programming at Gloob in Brazil. And Janine Weigold? Thank you. Head of Children's Content, Super RTL in Germany. So we have a range of countries, a range of services. Let's start with identifying a little bit of the differences of what's represented on the panel. Michael, a public service broadcaster. What is the role of a public service broadcaster in today's multi-channel, multi-platform role?
I think that's an incredible question. I think the role of a public service broadcaster hasn't really changed. I think we've always wanted to reflect and engage our children's audiences from a local perspective and then give them a window on the world. So the best that we can create internally, which have stories that are relevant to our local audiences, but then give them this extraordinary experience from the amazing content that's made everywhere else.
Excellent. And Patricia, so the channels you oversee are available in multiple territories. What type of programming can entertain children from different countries and cultures?
So when it comes to children, of course, they're much more similar in different cultures than adults are. This is even more true the younger they are. That said, when you look across the different regions, you actually do see that children are younger for longer in some markets than others. So you might have the same content might be appealing to a 6-year-old in one market and to an 8-year-old in another. So those are slight differences that you might find. You also find that some content doesn't travel as well as others. So when it comes to live action for kids, live action doesn't travel as well in some markets. So although live action travels well in Europe, where we're very used to the dubbing and the live action coming from the US, when you go into Asia or you go into India, it doesn't travel at all. So you have to be very local in those markets if you're going to be using live action. So the only thing that really is universal, if you think about kids' content, is animation. Animation is what works everywhere.
Right, right. And Paula, so what opportunity did you see in the children's space in Brazil?
In 2012, we did a huge research because we understood that there were channels for preschoolers and some other channels for 8 to 12 years old, but not really for 5 to 8 years old. So we did a research with more than 2,000 families, and we also understood that within Globoside's portfolio, it would be a good thing to have a children's channel. So besides that, we had a great ad sales opportunity because we didn't have an overlap with the other channels. So we went to the market, we did a huge research of content, when we found a lot of content out there, and we created Gloob, and it is a successful channel. We grew a lot during the past 5 years, and now we'll be launching Gloobinho, which is a preschool channel that will be launched in next Tuesday. So,
excellent. All right, Janine. The German children's market is crowded and very competitive. How has Super RTL developed such a loyal audience in such a competitive marketplace?
Well, I think it's, on the one hand, it's content, and we have quite a good mix of local content, so local faces, local needs, and what parents also like, because in Germany, parents' control is very strong. And on the other hand, we have great international brands that we get from all the big media houses, which is great. Like, for example, we also air Ben 10 from Turner, or Paw Patrol from Viacom, and many shows from different other independent producers. And then I also think we are a bit lucky because the German audience is perceived as very loyal, so they stay loyal, and we are quite long in the market, so it's over 25 years that Super RTL is in the market. So I think that also helps, and we are a great team. So we have a good management and very good people, so
excellent.
I think that's it.
Michael, we had a conversation via email, but a conversation nonetheless. Diversity is important to you. How are you reaching out in front of and behind the camera, and why is this important for you?
I think, you know, from my experience of working in Europe, it's no different to the experience in the US and Australia and New Zealand, that children want to see themselves reflected. And they may be disabled children, they may be indigenous children, they may be children who come from families that have emigrated to the country that they find themselves in. And I guess it's part of reflecting who they are that we are very aware and very open to telling those stories and making sure that not only do we see kids on screen that they can reflect themselves from, but also behind the camera. So when we're telling a story about our indigenous population in Australia, the Aboriginal peoples, we would want to make sure that we have people behind the camera, whether they're directors, producers, writers, etc., telling that story so that it has an authentic voice. And I think we spent a lot of time over the last year ensuring that on ABC Children's that we do connect with those audiences. We're part of schemes with the national funders from the agencies like Screen Australia and then the state and territory funding organisations. We've created internships where we have Indigenous people coming to work with us to nurture them and to train them in the crafts, as well as actors, performers, musicians, the whole gamut. And I think it's really important that in a world like today, which is quite fragmented, and we all know the things that we hear about around the world with Brexit and Trump and North Korea, that children are hearing that stuff. They're seeing it on the news, they're seeing or hearing it from their parents, and they feel unsettled. And so this is a way of also kind of grounding them in where they are and ensuring that they feel well protected and championed, I guess.
Excellent. Patricia, how do you work with the teams in the US, with the Turner teams in the US, in developing and producing product?
So first of all, I have to say that I'm very lucky because we have an extremely great relationship. We're like a family. I was saying that to Adina last night. She was saying that to me, actually. You know, we share everything from a very early stage. Whether it's, you know, an idea, development, you know, we're always involved in sharing those materials, and we give our feedback. Of course, you know, the US wants to make sure that what they're making is going to travel as far as wide as possible, so We all give our feedback. If there's any cultural issues, they will address those. We also work very well the other way around, because we do also create content internationally, and we do, share that with them. I mean, one of the very successful shows in our slate came from Europe, Gumball. Right. And we do, we share the same values when it comes to our brands, so that makes it very easy for us to be able to have a same view of what is it that we need. And when it comes to gaps in the schedule, we have a really great organization. We've got Cecilia Pearson, who's here in the audience, and she heads international acquisitions. She brings us all together, and then with Adina, they both confabulate to get global acquisitions for all of us. So I think we're a big family.
Excellent. Paula, you have said that Gloob's programming must preserve the channel's Brazilian DNA. How do you approach the international market for acquisitions and co-productions?
We, as a Brazilian DNA, what I mean is that we have a lot of original production. So we understand, as Michael was saying, that children, they want to see themselves on TV. So in the way we worked to differentiate ourselves within this global market in Brazil, because there's a lot of global players, was by producing original content with kids. So a lot of live action shows. But the values that we have are values that are universal. So we understand that the content that we will produce will be content that the situations that we're gonna put in the show will reflect and resonate to kids all over the world. So that's the way we've been doing.
Right. Janine, and all of us now will be talking about the different ways that children watch and on what device they watch. But is there a difference in the program offered by your linear channels and compared to what is offered on the streaming service Kividu? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, that's the name. Yes, there is. There is and there's not. Basically, for the linear channel, actually we focus on a target group from 3 to 9 years old. And we need to reach the masses because we are an ad-financed channel, basically. And I think if you want to describe us, it's pop culture for children masses. And for Kividu, we can go more in the niches with the SPOT platform. So we can go younger, we can go older, and we can go in different angles that we probably wouldn't decide for the linear channel because we would think it doesn't reach the broad mass.
Excellent. All right, so we're all here to hear the view from the top and what you're looking for, so why don't we kick off the discussion with that? What are you looking for? And can you give a breakdown between the amount of programming on your channel that is imported and instead what you commission or produce yourselves? And then we'll touch on co-productions, which is a very broad bucket term, and we'll see how you approach those and what the models are. But anyone who wants to answer, what are you looking for?
They're all looking at me. I guess, it's a really difficult question to answer because when you see it, you know it. But I guess, broadly speaking, we're always looking for stories that engage with children from their perspective. And normally that's through a sense of humor, whether it's animation or live action, comedy, drama. I guess there's the specialty that we're looking for, or that uniqueness, is the emotional connection between the characters, so the bond that they have, which then translates into a screen experience that also engages with and emotionally stimulates somehow the child viewer. So it's a really broad thing, and you never really want to get specific because sometimes you might want an elephant show and then you see a giraffe show and actually you love it and you want to bring it to your audiences. So it's quite broad. We have quite a big internal production unit that creates the content where the kids see themselves on screen. And we make a mixture of entertainment and factual shows. We work with Australian producers particularly to commission drama series, and that is generally comedy driven. And we'll talk about co-production in a bit.
So in our case, we continue looking for animation for both our networks. That's primary our primary type of content that we want. But we really are looking for partnerships. We want to find, the right partners that we can develop or co-develop content with. That might not just be content that, of course, can sit well along with the content that is in our networks, but that can also be franchisable. If there is anybody that has a great idea that they think they want to develop or co-develop, and that it could be a potential franchise. We have the know-how in terms of, we have the networks, we've got the franchise teams, we've got the ability to work together with you and bring something to life and create something together.
We've been looking, we have a lot of partnerships. We've been doing a lot of co-productions, but I can talk about that later on. And what we want is the next hit, which is very hard to find. There's no formula, but we need a lot of sensibility, I think, to work and to choose the content we want to acquire. We want a lot of, actually the stories must be character driven, and we need to engage the children. That's the most important. And we've been doing that a lot with the original content. That's our main goal. I don't know how to say that, but between commissioned programs and acquired ones, it's almost 50-50. We have a lot of original productions.
Well, I can actually we also look for the next hit, and we also like partnerships. I think it's basically, the answer is always the same. We look for great characters and for inspiring stories. I think what is actually interesting that at the moment the landscape changed, and that there's so much content out there, and that we have to decide at a very early stage actually, and that that makes it very interesting, and that makes it also sometimes hard, because indeed when you see it you want it, or sometimes you feel like you have to see more and more. But in the end, it's always like, that kids get engaged, get inspired, that it has a life on different other platforms, and a long life also, because, for example, we repeat content very, very often, so it needs to stay on for quite some years, actually.
Right.
I think, it's interesting, one of the aspects that we have to consider too, as the Australian public broadcaster, is that our market is flooded by all of the usual suspects. All friends and colleagues, but nevertheless competitors. And the quality of the content that comes into Australia from abroad, whether it's the US or Europe, is so high that our audiences have this massive expectation that what we deliver them is also movie quality and has impact. So when we're talking to potential partners and co-production partnerships, we are looking for that edge that kind of brings that distinctive, high quality, engaging visual material as well. And also, as a public service broadcaster, we can afford to take risks. We're not bound by commercial revenues, so within the boundaries of good sense, we can push the boundaries a little bit.
Right, we mentioned co-productions. Again, it's a broad term. Can you give some examples of some of the financial models that you like to engage in? And you mentioned buying early. Are pre-sales also important to you? Getting in on something very early, that obviously must be an advantage.
Yes, for us it's actually, as we're an ad finance channel, so we need to find the content that right away fits our audience in the best case. And thus we like to come on board very early. But it's more a pre-sale, sometimes co-production, but pre-sale logic than any other.
For us, it is really important, as we're not a pan-regional channel, it is hard to buy only for Brazil and being competitive. So the way we create to achieve great results was by entering into co-production. So we have a co-production with Argentina, Colombia, and Chile. Each one gives a part of the budget and keeps it the equity for the market. We also have the licensing and merchandising, which we are investing a lot too. And we also have another co-production, which is with Hi, Gaumont, Radio Canada, Disney EMEA, and Congedo. So we're working together. And that's the way we got in the projects in a very early stage. So we need a lot of sensibility to get into those projects and a lot of money. So we need to invest.
So it's very similarly. It really depends on when we get into the game and what the relationship is. So whether it's it can be something like an enhanced acquisition where we're not that invested, but we are a little bit invested. Or it can be something that is much bigger because we become partners, not just in producing the show together, but also in exploiting that show, as I said before, as a franchise. So, I can't give you a figure. It's just, it really depends on the IP and what is the overall business proposition.
Beyond the financial considerations in a jointly produced, jointly financed, is it you said earlier that children are more similar than they are different, but when you're co-producing, are the kind of values and the kind of curriculum that you're looking to bring forward in the show, does that also come into play as you're working with your partners?
Well, in our case, what's important is to find the right partner. So there's no use going into a co-development or co-production with a partner that it hasn't got similar values to yours, because then you're going to be fighting all the time and the series is going to suffer, right? So we have, for example, we work a lot in Europe with France Television and Boomerang, because they have very similar DNA. So we know that, whatever they like, we like. It's almost like seamless. We don't even need to, we always agree in most of the curriculum of what we want. So it's finding the right partner, whether it's the producer and the broadcaster, because in our case, we are a pay channel, so we look for a free-to-air broadcaster as well to be part of the equation.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for us in Australia. We have a very high level of multiculturalism. We have our First Nation peoples, we have our European ancestry, and then we have more modern immigration from Southeast Asia and India and Polynesia. So we're fortunate that we're interested in broad stories, broad range of stories, so they can come from anywhere. They just have to be from the child's perspective. Co-production is interesting for us because we also like to help our industry. We're a very small country, a population of some 24 million. The children's audience is around 3.2 million, so it's quite small, smaller than Scandinavia. But we want to bring them stories that help stimulate their interest in the rest of the world. As well as the stories that we can create from our local storytelling. But we tend to like to work through Australian producers. So Australian producers tend to come to us with their own IP, but also they come to us with co-production opportunities with international partners. Australia, like many Western countries, has treaties, co-production treaties with the usual countries like Canada and the UK and France, etc., and even China, I think. Although I could be wrong on that point. I've only been there a year, but I know New Zealand does. But I guess what I'm saying is that co-production opportunities for Australia are quite small, and so therefore they have to be very distinctive in what they look like and the types of stories that they're trying to tell, and generally come with an Australian producer.
And we all know that children watch on whatever screen and device is most convenient in that moment. Give us an idea of in how many ways you offer content to children.
Well, basically, well, we have to be in all ways, which is actually not always easy because the habits change quite quickly. But it also offers different possibilities. So basically, sometimes I feel like, especially in marketing, we were used to kick off big marketing campaigns and then roll them out for like 3 months ahead, etc. But now you feel like, okay, if you do that, then probably something has changed in between, or you feel like the brand is more perceived as a on a game side or something. Then you have to change it and you have to adapt your plans. So I feel like it's we have to adapt to that, and we have to be quick and maybe smarter, but it also enriches actually the industry and enriches all the perception with the children and the engagement with the children. But yeah, we try to be everywhere, on websites, apps, SWOT, and TV.
Right.
We have online driven productions, original productions. So we have our linear productions. We are producing to all the platforms, different stories. We are creating spin-offs of our series for all the other digital devices.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think that kids are consuming not just the video content, they're consuming games, apps. So what's important is make sure that whichever IP you're trying to grow, you have that bespoke content for that specific IP. So you have your game, you have your app, you have your video. But you also, something that we're doing at Cartoon Network is we're also, from the inception of the IP, we're also working with digital teams and with the marketing teams to create a lot of content from the word go. So it's not after the fact of having created the series, but as you are creating the series, you're thinking about what is that series, how does that series feel or look in different platforms, and you start creating for all those platforms as well.
Television is still very important to children, although it could be just on in the background these days. But the majority of our audiences still watch television, but there's no doubt that they are moving to a video on demand scenario, and we offer free video on demand. We have apps for both of our children's channels or brands, ABC Kids and ABC Me. We have our websites and we have partnerships with YouTube. So we are trying to be everywhere that children are. I think the interesting thing about all of that is that you don't really have to think about short form anymore. You like to offer short form, but there's no doubt that you can do series work, longer running programs. I remember the transition to digital, children tended to only watch 2 minutes and then they got distracted and did something else. Well, now they're binging just like their parents are with SVOD services. So I guess that's the key, that we're creating stories and episodes that will migrate seamlessly between all of whatever the platform. We're essentially genre-driven, not platform-driven.
Right. For those of you involved in preschool programming, what are you looking for? And we all know that the children are extremely savvy when it comes to media and they expect high production values. How low does that age go? Do you find that you have to keep that in mind too when you're producing for the littlest viewers, or has that part of your job remained pretty much the same over the years in terms of the production values? Is it curriculum that you're most concerned with in preschool, or is the production part of it also important?
It's an interesting question. I think, all the public service broadcasters that I've worked with have never really been educational in their output. They tend to be entertainment-driven but underpinned by learning values. I guess that's because children learn best through play. At the ABC, we offer a long-running series called Preschool, which is probably the second oldest preschool show in the world, certainly the oldest children's program in Australia, but it appeals to very young children and sort of sits in that 2- and 3-year-old bracket. And then we have older content for the 3 to 5s, almost that transition that you used to have to work between preschool and older children's has kind of disappeared anyway because they have access to your content wherever it is. So we don't particularly have in mind age group specific content these days, nor curriculum-driven stuff, although we do educational programming in specific school blocks. For preschool audiences, it's a much broader approach, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, for us, we're starting Gloobinho, which is the preschool channel, next Tuesday, and we've been acquiring a lot of programs, and what our goal is to entertain the kids. But the most important is for preschoolers, we have a lot of responsibility, is to help to develop their social emotional abilities. So this is really important. So that's what we look throughout the programs that we buy.
We also look for heroic characters, like characters, role models that they can look up. And I also think that the age group has also changed, and that's actually sometimes it's interesting because preschoolers for us grew a little bit older, so actually it's more the 4 to 6 years old, but it's always difficult to say it in specific age groups, but still we grew a little older, and we feel like that they also get engaged on different platforms already, so that they look more for the content, and then they want, I mean, they don't, but the parents look for some content, and then they want it somewhere, and they find it somewhere, and then they just watch it wherever it is. So basically also there we have to try to be everywhere.
How much are the streaming services, Netflix, Amazon, YouTube, impacting your markets?
There's no doubt that they're seen by a growing number of people, and particularly over the last year or so, Netflix has had a huge uptake in Australia. Amazon is not quite there yet, but we're expecting them to arrive any minute. So I guess they're, they offer the content that they offer, but they're not offering specifically Australian content, although there is some Australian content in the second window. But generally, we're driving the audiences with original production. But, they're our friends. We work with them as well. We have a major live-action series called The Legend of Monkey, which is a huge partnership with Netflix for the ABC in Australia.
I think the arrival of Netflix and Amazon has had good and bad things for all of us. On the good side, they are the disruptors, and disruption is good because it makes you have to think again and say, rethink what you're doing. It also means that, there is more money out there for the industry, so that's good. It keeps it healthy. And of course, there's more platforms for us to also have our content exposed.
Sure.
On the bad thing, they are, competitors. Netflix is a broadcaster. You can't think it's something else. It's actually another channel now. So it is competing for the time, that the kids have, or the limited time that the kids have.
Right.
I think they've said it all. But yes, they're big. They have a huge impact on the business. But as they are disruptive, they keep us focused on investing and creating more business models and more content. And it's a challenge. This new way of the way the industry is performing, and the video consumption are also changing. So it's a real challenge, but it helps us to keep focused and creative.
What we try very much is, we also see them, and certainly they are there. What we try very much to look at us, what are we? We are a free TV station, and then we try very much celebrate free TV. So basically installing more kind of live moments that kids really want to tune in and have to talk about it next day in the school. Because if they miss that in that moment, then they cannot talk about. So it means like creating, live shows. Well, semi-live shows, but
right.
events that they need to know what happens in the end, and also some interaction between online, so second screen events, etc.
But to speak on behalf of the linear channels, doesn't a host, especially with children, can't a channel create a special connection? And do children still write in, or what do they do? Do they also tweet or send emails? Isn't that a strong connection that a linear channel still has that maybe a streaming service doesn't?
Yeah, I think it comes to that immediacy that we're in their face all the time, and that they can interact with us on a daily basis. We have a lot of user-generated material. They just send us stuff, even in programs where we don't even call for it. They're always sending us stuff, and they do interact with us through our apps and through our websites. So I guess it's a really interesting point that, yes, we're almost live in their lives as opposed to something that they can sit back and binge on.
Yeah, I agree. I think, linear channels have for many, many years created an emotional connection with their audience, which goes above and beyond the programs that they're offering. And what I think is going to end up happening is that we're going to see that same type of connection going into the non-linear space. And there's going to start, I believe there will be a competition at some point where we will see the same or a similar type of evolving relationship having to be created to stay at the top. Because no longer you're going to just be able to just give shelves and shelves of videos, right. And that's not going to be enough.
Right, right.
I think your question was about the hosts, was that?
I'm sorry?
Your question, sorry.
It was with linear channels that have hosts, does that not create a special connection with the children as opposed to just streaming or binging on a streaming service?
I think the connection that the kids have is the connection with the characters. So nowadays, more and more, the kids, they are the protagonists of their own stories. So with the technology that has evolved a lot, they could be the protagonists of the shows. So I think a host, as we've seen in the 90s, it's not something that I see nowadays in Brazil, especially as a real connection.
I also think it changed. Basically, you cannot put just a host on TV and expect that he gets the interaction. You still have to send him out. You have to make him do some social network stuff or do some short content, interact directly with the children. But then, yes, if you do that and if you do it properly, then I think there is a strong connection with hosts.
Okay, well, I'm sorry that we have to end the conversation, but the session has not yet ended, so 1 minute. Going to join me now, and this is the portion of the session in which we would like to recognize these individuals for their contribution to the children's industry. Let's not forget that children are, especially today, they are vulnerable, they are exposed to a lot that maybe we wouldn't want them to be exposed to, and you carry a huge burden in helping them develop. So on that note, we would like to present you the the Kids Trendsetter Award for your, sorry, I messed that up. I told you we're jet lagged. The Kids Trendsetter Award for your contribution to the children's television industry. So. Michael, please.
Hello. Oh, yeah, sure.
Patricia? Paula? And Janine. Okay, now let's do a group photo. And we have boxes. Don't leave without boxes. Okay, but for the